Any reflections from last week or any questions or comments, observations? No?
So our homework from last week
Yeah.
was to think about all that we had spoken about and see if you could see them in your day-to-day encounters.
Okay, good, good. And then Matt, you had your hand up for a moment there.
Yes, I did. You mentioned last time, I want to make sure I understood it right. It resonated with me. You said you do not believe in reincarnation. Did I misunderstand that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I misunderstood, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. That's I wanted to confirm that.
But I think that maybe I don't know if I was this class, but I might have been referring to, no, I don't think it was this class. But anyway, I think the I think that what we have access to is that I think that a fundamental principle in Buddhism, which I really like, is the fact that we don't accept things on faith. So what that means is that you can, excuse me, not just can, but I mean, we're sort of committed to a sort of also a path of reasoning, inference, logic, and reincarnation and karma are very, very difficult to how to say this. We have to use quite a robust approach of logic and reasoning in order to sort of unwrap reincarnation, karma, and those kinds of things. But they do lend themselves to logic and reasoning. I think the logic and reasoning that we have to apply in those two topics and others is something that one probably can't do at the very first class, the first beginning without getting sort of an overview of what we're doing, what Buddhism presents. Because if you come in to the Buddhist system not knowing that it's sort of a requirement to use our logic and reasoning, then you have one maybe hasn't developed that skill or that skill, which is paramount in our development, even in terms of attaining liberation. And recently I've been talking a lot in another class, excuse me, about meditation and how that, what I've sort of, found that people's idea of meditation is very sort of distorted or limited. And that meditation, of course, in the Buddhist context, is something you do after listening, which I sort of refer to as educating, because listening implies reading and that sort of thing, getting the information. So we have a very strong commitment to have the data, the information first, that to really do a deep process of meditation demands that we have the right content. And then not only the content, but then actually having thought about it, right? Contemplating it. So they usually talk about the three stages of learning of being a listening, contemplating, and meditation. So meditation at that in that explanation is really experiential, right? So if you take any teachings of the Buddha, just about we do have that demand um, that we engage with it from an experiential level. And just we would say an intellectual level would only cover really listening, maybe contemplating, right? But meditation demands the experience. So all the things that we've been talking about and everything else, all the 84,000 teachings are meant to be experiential. Otherwise, it is faith. Now, there is a place for faith. So, for example, excuse me, due to maybe someone's experience with a particular teacher, that they develop a sense of confidence. I think faith might also be related with confidence. So that's why it's not blind faith. But of course, we do need faith because if someone tells you it's really important for you to meditate on death, for example, in order to overcome certain situations in one's life or just to develop one's spiritual ability, uh, we may not really know why, and the teacher might say, well, it's for this and this, and you might have some questions, but because the source you have confidence in, then you would engage in faith. And same with really all these more subtle, more hidden teachings, right? Because so many of these, so many of these teachings uh, are so subtle, right? They're so subtle and so deep to get to to the deeper meaning of them. If you don't have faith or some sort of confidence, you're not going to engage with them, right? Because you can't have a direct understanding of them without some level of openness to the ideas. Maybe that openness is a kind of faith, or faith comes from that openness. Yeah, I hope that answers the question at least somewhat.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I understood you right, because otherwise, then karma doesn't make sense if you
Doesn't.
don't believe in rebirth, and there's a whole row of dominoes falling. So I was surprised to hear that. That
Right,
was
right.
Thank you for
Yeah.
elaborating on it.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's a worthwhile conversation also to have at some point about, well, how do you meditate on reincarnation, for example, and karma? And that's where I left off a thought, which was that as people were asking me in this other class about meditation, I mentioned to them, well, in this tradition, we have the placement meditation or single pointed concentration or calm abiding, whatever you want to call it. And that's the understanding of people who are, most people's understanding of meditation. And even a great deal of people don't even frame it in that way, right? They just think of it as, I don't know, mindfulness or being aware or something like that, which is not bad, but that's not really meditation. Yeah, and so I've been sort of promoting, I have been for a while, the need for students to receive instruction in analytical meditation. So what's interesting about that word, if you really unpack it for a minute, we're not just talking about analyzing, which is debate, they do in the monasteries in terms of debate, discussion, that sort of thing. But that's not analytical meditation. It's somewhat related. Analytical meditation is when you take the process of debate, analyzing, reasoning, logic, whatever you want to call it, and then it leads to a meditative state, and you apply that process to one's meditation. That is different than placement meditation, where you're really trying to develop the quality of mindfulness and focus, right? Focus and well, particularly focus, you know. So with analytical meditation, you are still developing the power or the ability of focus. It's analytical meditation is not separate. It's not done without focus. So, and it's a very powerful technique. Yeah. In terms of the what we talked about last week, Zayla, that did people, I just really was trying to because what we're doing in this class is kind of academic at this level. It's not meant to stay in academia. It's meant to lead into meditation, particularly analytical meditation. So I was just curious if you felt, some sort of awareness during the week of these different afflictive emotions that we've talked about and how they pop up. Let me admit that person. Yeah. No? Okay. You can admit them. Oh, came up. Okay. Uh, did anyone just have or any reflections on that? Or did you all get an F for your homework? Yeah, I guess so.
Well, you can give me an F. That's okay. That means that I'm not attached. That's good. Okay.
Okay.
But one of the things that this is more generic. It's
Mm.
like wanting so strongly that every moment I'm conscious, I'm super aware of like remembering to be kind, remembering to not be attached, remembering that what I'm seeing is not necessarily what's happening, and continually introspecting rather than distracting myself externally so much.
Hmm.
So it's like feeling like I'm really working on a heavy commitment to this.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
I
that's
would
a
say,
big change for me because escapism, like I like escaping, obviously.
so do
Yeah,
I. There's no contradiction. I mean, the point is that we talk about practice, right? And we talk about a path. So it's not like we're there, or at least I'm not. And so what we're doing is sort of unraveling a process. And to get to the place that you were just describing, Jay, is that it's a very advanced state of being where you're aware all the time. And I think what we're just striving for is incremental improvement, and we're all at different places, you know. So it doesn't, the goal is full awareness, of course. Well, that's not the goal, but that's one goal. And then the goal after that comes, well, what do you do about all that stuff, and that's sort of the practice, right? But the practice is also is very important for us to uh, be aware that the practice is really not limited to the cushion. We always say I have to do my practice. And I think I think that's a misconception. The practice on the cushion is so that you can go out in the world and be different.
One day in my nest,
Uh-huh.
society might us. One day in
So, it's not, Lama Yeshe was very, very strict or adamant about the fact that particularly Westerners thought it was all the practice meant meditation. He very was very disciplined in how he would put people in a retreat and how he put people into meditation practice, um, because being overemphasized, focusing overly emphasizing the idea, the concept that practice meant on the cushion. Practice on the cushion is practice. It's like it's like practicing the violin, but then when you go into a concert, you're not practicing, right? And the same thing, or getting in shape, when you want to train for a marathon, you might go to the gym and, you know, train on the treadmill and do weightlifting and stuff like that. But that's not running a marathon. But we need that to run the marathon. So it's not to mistake it for what the actual practice really is. And the practice it really is being in well, half of the practice what it really is being in the world. Jay, you can't, to be more compassionate, we have to sit on our cushion and meditate on compassion, but a compassion that's applicable, right? We want to do not just theoretical. So it's very, very powerful to bring up events that happen when you're not on your cushion, you're in the marketplace, as they say, and bring them back to your cushion, and then bringing what you do in the cushion out to the marketplace. That's what we're trying to do. And eventually, for the yogi, for the practitioner, the meditator, those two happen seamlessly eventually, someday, where there's not really a separation between when they're on their cushion and when they're out in the marketplace. Yes, Robert.
All right. Let me just clarify on that awareness.
Yeah.
So classically, we would say originally we would see things arise in our thoughts. There would be a witness to that. And we'd
Hmm.
say, oh, there's something happening there. There's an emotion. Is this correct what you mean by awareness when there seems to be just space, almost like you're just watching TV?
No, no. Well, if I understand you correctly, no, awareness is the first one. Awareness can be, well, so one of the powers, so when we talk about the practice, like with analytical meditation, is yes, you're aware of what's going on, number one, but you're also aware of the process. And the process of what's going on is what we're talking about in this class. We're reauthoring authoring. So for example, you have a run-in with someone at work. And you can author that, or you can story that, or you can describe that in many different ways. Now, the way that we do when we're not spiritual people is we're saying, "Oh, the guy's, he's such a prick, he's just all he gets. Everyone has a problem with him, right?" Well, that's one explanation. That's one awareness, right? That's one explanation of an awareness. So you're aware of his attitude and how he was or she was, rude to you and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Now, with what we're doing is we're offering a different map, okay, a different description, and there's multiple. So there's not countless, but there's many. Like for example, person you have the same run-in, and you're aware. Now, then this time now you're aware of how it triggers you, for
Hmm.
example. So you're not just so usually remember the word for in Tibetan for Buddhist is Nangpa, which means an inner being, which I think is a powerful statement alone, because 99.9%, I don't know, everyone, of living beings are outer beings, right? They explain the world from an outer focus. He's in a bad mood, he had a hard childhood, he's from this other culture, and they just talk that way. I remember talking to friends because I did a lot, I was a coach before and a psychotherapist, and I did executive coaching a lot with Silicon Valley companies. And they would say the Israelis were the hardest to work with in the companies in technology. He says, because they just always argue and they just challenge you and everything. And then the guy says, but then I learned that they were the best people to work with because they really weren't, it wasn't so personal. It's just how they processed. Right? So that's a different narrative, right? One person sees someone reacting rudely and confrontationally and describe it as, oh, this is from his childhood, or he had a bad morning, he didn't have his coffee, he was on his meds, right? That's all outer. That's samsara. So we talk about samsara and nirvana. That's samsara. Those explanations do not lead to any, for the most part, I'm not generalizing, but those explanations don't lead to any resolution, do they? Because the next time you come in contact with someone, now going back to what Jay was saying about compassion, you start developing different frames. So now the person's rude to you, you might come from the point of view of compassion. You might come from the point of view of karma. You might come from the point of view of reincarnation. You might come from the point of view as I'm so happy he's rude to me because I'm in the process of developing compassion and I need rude people to develop compassion. So those are all different inner beings descriptions. Okay. So we are just changing descriptions from an outer being description to an inner being. Why? Because the inner being or the inner, if we have the right information, by the way, because the other, I don't mean the sense now, some people get confused because they'll say, he was so rude to me. It must be because I'm such a bad person. It must be because I don't have any patience. It must be because, and that can sound like inner dialogue or inner practice, but that's not either. I mean, it's maybe a step, but it's not one that has much resolution if it leads to self-loathing, self-hatred, self-criticism. That's not dharma either. Okay? And this is part of the problem with modern day psychology because they only take it so far, right? The attempt is good, but the depth is it's so shallow that it doesn't, it's helpful. It might make a more peaceful relationship, but it doesn't lead to any kind of liberation or resolution of the problem at its root, right? And the root is what we're talking about in this class. Yes. Yeah, Zayla?
I have a question.
Oh,
So
good. So much better than
this,
talking about all that content stuff and all this five this, six that, seven of this, three of that. Although that is
well,
what
I
we
don't
have
know,
to
you may,
do.
because I'm going to confess. All right,
Yeah.
so I I can see the moment where I think that person's a dickhead. All right.
Uh-huh.
And then
Uh-huh.
I can see the moment where I let that anger go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I'm looking for is how to stop that moment where I make that judgmental, he's a dickhead, um,
Mm-hmm.
thought and
Mm-hmm.
stopping that. That's where I'm struggling is getting that idiot,
Yeah, well, right.
versus yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
that makes
first of all, he is an idiot, so you don't have to do it anymore.
so true.
Um,
I knew I was right
yeah. So
and perfect, of
that's,
course.
I mean, that question is in a way it's kind of the root of the issue. In a way that's the root of the issue. And it all depends. So that dickhead is standing there and he's talking to two people, both of you, and one person gets triggered and another doesn't. Why?
Let's see, the person that got triggered inserted themselves into the situation on a more personal level, like maybe they they spun the whole situation into over exaggerating everything. Oh, well, he's a dickhead because he thinks that I'm this or I do this or
Hmm.
um
Why does that person go there and the other person doesn't?
I
I
would
think the other
say,
person's just, oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, I was going to say that I think it just takes time and practice of reminding yourself every time you see the guy in the store, hey, maybe the first time you get really angry at him. And then when you take all this time to think about, well, maybe that person's just having a bad day. And if you use all of the techniques and the meditations that Buddhism gives you, then, and maybe I need to just consider all of the things that that person could be my mother in a past life. That's one of the techniques,
Mhm.
to
So,
to meditate on all of the different having loving kindness for that person. And then hopefully, my hope is by doing these meditations over and over again, it seems to get easier each time I meet that person in the grocery store. And then
mhm.
maybe as time goes on, I don't react so much to him.
Right. But
That's just my.
that's right. That's good. But I'm going a little bit more provocative. I'm asking why? Why does Sunshine have that reaction and Mary Jo does not, or Zayla does not? Why?
Because I think I'm more important than him.
Where did you
Because of
get,
the self-cherishing.
where did that come from?
Maybe from myself thinking that I am important.
See, yeah. So what I, so the situation is, see, this is where we got to go deeper. This is why Buddhist logic and Buddhist psychology and philosophy is so profound. Um, this is where we get to. Okay, so from both Western modern recent modern theory, psychological theory. So the reason that Zayla goes there and Sunshine doesn't is because of the past. Okay. Now, in modern psychology, when they say past, they mean this lifetime. So and then they don't have agreement. They might say you were born with those genes. Your mom was an angry person and your dad was, blah blah blah. And so it's in your genetic mark. Now that's one, so they say that, right? Then in other uh Western modalities, they might say, oh, it was your family upbringing, or and then upbringing, it was your family system. Yeah, oh, you grew up, or it could be you grew up in an alcoholic family, and alcoholics always get angry in those situations. So, depending on your model, it's explained from the past, right? But from Buddhist model, it's completely explained from the past, but it doesn't use that perspective. All of those are important, by the way, even Buddhism. Even in Buddhism, of course, family dynamics, family upbringing, genetics, all those are now what we call them. This is really, really super important. Okay. So make a little note for this. In the world, modern psychology, philosophy, those things that I just outlined are called causes. The reason you did. That's a cause, right? The reason you had that effect, well, they're talking about a cause. The reason you had that effect is because of your genetics. The reason you had that effect is because you had an angry mother. The reason you had that effect is because you came from an alcoholic family. The reason you had that effect is because you were a third child, and third child are always a loss, right? Depending on a psychologist or therapist model, they'll give you that one. Now, what I think is interesting is what's happening in neuroscience and neuropsychologists. Because they will say, well, that's the way your brain got wired. And a lot of the neuroscientists are saying, well, I shouldn't say that. Certain neuroscientists, I'm not an expert on this, so don't press me too hard. But certain neuroscientists will say those neural pathways were created in your life, not that you were born with them. Some will say you're born with them. But many say, and I think it's very interesting, that those were created as you went through your life experiences and you made meaning of those experiences. Okay. When I was practicing therapist, because I was a Buddhist first, and I had spent some 14 years by that point in Nepal before I moved back to California. And then Lama Zopa Rinpoche's advice became a clinical psychologist. And it was like torture because I had to go through all these theory classes and all this stuff. And it's like, you train as a psychologist, psych, meaning mind, spirit, right? Mind or spirit or whatever. An ologist is what, a student of or someone who studies the psyche. So as someone who studies the mind, and I never once, and I keep asking this question, and I know Dan Siegel, for those of you who might have heard from him, who works a lot with neuroscience. Anyway, he's great stuff if you can read Dan Siegel's stuff. Um, uh, I would call him a neuropsychologist, but he doesn't call himself that. Um, in in how so the way I dealt with this lack of depth or understanding in modern psychology was I was just very lucky. I just not stumbled upon, but I got exposed to constructivist theory. And in constructivist theory, where everything is constructed, right? There were some psychologists who developed a psychological model and a therapeutic model dealing with constructivist theory, which meant since you're constructing, you have constructed your reality. It's merely constructed. Then you can reconstruct it. Okay, and that's what Buddhism does. Okay, that's what Buddhism, what Sunshine was mentioning, what she might do in the supermarket. That is creating a different narrative because it's all just narrative. It's all constructed. So when we look at those models of psychology that I just was blabbing off, everyone, systems theory and family theory and um, mm, substance abuse theory, genetic theory, all these things. So this is the important point I wanted to share with you is those are called conditions, not causes. Okay? And this is where we need to be able to make that transition of understanding things arising from causes and not conditions. Now, way back to Matt's first question, what are the causes? Karuna, if you're telling us those are all conditions, not causes, then what are causes? So the cause, and this is not this class, but you guys have tricked me into talking about something else. The causes are karma. Now, karma, just forget the word for a second because it's so loaded. What it means is that every experience that we have with our five senses, and we went through this a couple weeks ago, the construction of the mind, every experience. So I'm looking at you guys on the screen and I'm experiencing this through my eye organ, my visual consciousness, and an object, the screen, the pixels, the colors, all that, and the shapes. Are we together? And then uh, maybe I get afraid or I get bored, whatever, right? And people will say, well, the cause of your boredom is because had a hard day and you didn't get much sleep last night and you're tired, right? That's always how it goes. That's the cause, correct? Have we got it wrong? In the supermarket, the cause is the guy cut in line in front of you and blah, blah, blah. Or then in modern psychology, and then they take it further. No, the cause is that, in your family, you're always the one, left out of, and always got your dinner last or, something, right? Your big brother always cut you off and took the better piece of chicken, you know. So at the dinner table, that's not the cause. So I'll leave this in a second, but I think it was a good segue and a good time to talk about the cause of why that rude coworker or boss triggered you and didn't trigger Jay is because of the imprints on your consciousness. That's all. Imprints, not literally, but for our discussion, imprints means karma. So when I'm looking at you guys, you're looking at me, we're making gazillions of imprints on our consciousness right now. Now, if we're really angry at each other, right, then the potency of that imprint is stronger than if we're just sort of sitting here or just bored. Bored is not probably as strong an imprint as if I was angry. That's karma. Because an angry imprint is going to lead to a more accentuated result. Okay? Okay, you can go home
So
now.
I just want to see if I hear you. Oh, sorry. I want to see if I hear you. So
Yeah.
what you're saying is basically it's not nature or nurture, it's neither.
Well, it's kind of
It's your mind.
nature. Well, it's both, and it's both, of course. But nature is the conditions, probably. Better way to say. Yeah. And nurture might be more around imprints, you know.
Okay.
But you can have. Okay. So in narrative therapy, which was what I became very fond of, I still am fond of it, but they only go so far, right? They don't have karma and all those things. And so their strong belief is that everything is socially is created through narrative in our social interactions with the worlds from when we're born. And so I think I was still an intern, maybe I was just licensed. And my supervisor was a very well-known narrative therapist, a theorist. We were sitting in supervision one day, and his job is kind of do more education, and then we would run cases by him, and then he would, we would sort of deconstruct them as to how to think of them in sort of a narrative or constructivist way. And he was talking about this. He said, so I asked him at one point. I said, well, it's all nurture, all socially constructed. When you have a pair of twins, and they grow up in the same family and essentially have the same, you know, same parenting, the same influence. I said, and one becomes a serial killer and one becomes, a saint. I said, how do you explain that then? Because that's karma, right? I mean, there's no other explanation than the imprints they brought. But you want to know what his answer was? Anyone want to guess what his answer was? Come on, just one person.
Choices?
Huh?
Was it a choice?
It
Was it a
was
choice?
it was the opposite of choice. His answer was it's random. That's because I pushed him into a corner where their philosophy hadn't gone far enough, right? Buddhist philosophy and psychology goes all the way. There's nothing missing. I mean, of course, practically speaking, there's some things missing, Uh, you know, I'm not saying that it answers every social problem and interaction. It can, but anyway, we don't want to go there right now. it's not practical for some people, you know. When you don't tell a beggar, there's a famous saying, when you meet a beggar in the road, don't teach philosophy. Give him some food, right? Yeah, so we have to be practical at the same time. The technical part is anyway, um so random. That's as far as they've gotten, or that in that particular theory. So I hope that it kind of gives a little bit of a window on what karma might mean. It means imprints, and imprints are never lost. And they're stored on the consciousness. And the consciousness being formless, right? We talked about that. It's beginningless and it's endless. Talked about that. Well, that's why that ex that gives some sheds a little light on reincarnation and a little light on how karma works because those karmic imprints are stored in the consciousness. They're not molecular or made of form. Otherwise, they would disappear at the time of death. It's when we leave our body. Because they're not, they are embedded in the consciousness, and that's why they can awaken any time. Unfortunately, they don't have a. I mean, there is a map to them. Okay, I guess we can go home. No, no. Okay. Any other questions? And then, um, with what we're talking about now, I think
Mary
that.
Jo has a question,
Oh,
Karuna.
yes. Yes. You have to unmute. Hit your space bar. There you
I'm
go.
sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand right here.
That's okay.
I
Don't worry.
Would you please repeat what you said about anger being causing a deeper or more strong im-
Yeah, yeah. Right. Um, so we're going to karma now, um, which is helpful in when we look at these afflictions. Imprints have different potencies. So, and actions have different potencies in general. Okay. In general. So, if I kill a living being, the potency of that imprint is different, is weightier. Now, there are a lot of conditions involved in that, variables, but just speaking simply, that that imprint has more potency than, say, if I gossip, which is also a negative, considered an unwholesome action, 10 non-virtues, right? The reason for that is to kill something. Now, so first of all, killing can also be the potency of killing can be very light also. When we're driving down the road and running over insects we can't see, we are killing, but the potency is much lighter. It's different than if you're, seeking someone out to kill them and torture them first. So anger is one of those. So any action, what determines the karmic potency of that action is not the action. It's the mindset behind it. The truth of the matter is, it's very hard to kill without a strong mental energy. Intentionally kill. Okay? The intention of gossiping is more around ignorance, and unawareness. Anger has, actually, we could say anger is directly more potent, so doing anything with anger is probably leaving a more stronger imprint than doing something out of ignorance. Now, I'm being very general about it because there's things you can do in ignorance that are, as heavy as anything else. I mean, you can kill out of ignorance, for example, right? Killing out of ignorance might leave a less strong potency on the consciousness than killing out of intense anger, probably does. So the reason the 10 non-virtues are non-virtues is not because of their actions. Repeat. The 10 non-virtues are not non-virtues because of their actions. They're negative non-virtues because it's very hard to have a positive mental attitude when you kill, when you steal, when you sexually misbehave, when you lie, when you gossip, when you speak harshly, when you split people apart. Okay. Now that those 10 non-virtues do not apply, the potency is true, but then there's three that are mental, right? And we're leaving those aside for a moment because those are not actions per se. Those are mental attitudes. Okay. Um, okay. Does that help, Joe? Hit your space bar. Hit your space bar. Uh,
Thank
yeah.
you. Um,
So it's the mind behind it that determines the potency of an imprint. Okay. You
so,
could.
for example, if
Mm-hmm.
somebody that has a job of killing things,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but without anger,
Correct.
their their karmic load is is still high, but
Yeah.
it's not as high as if they were doing it through anger.
Quite possibly, but I to kill like an exterminator, for example, exterminator. We're generalizing, right? An exterminator is going to kill out of ignorance. The mindset, the affliction is probably ignorance. You know, we're totally generalizing, but just to make a point, yeah, it could be out of attachment to ridding the world of vermin. You know, but
Or
anyway, yeah.
to a paycheck.
Or get a paycheck can be, yeah, all attachment. But the point is just so we can talk in very general terms because there's not a class on karma which goes into more and more detail. Um, I think that's correct what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope I'm right. Check up. As Lama Yeshe always says, check up. Don't accept what I'm saying is true. This is when you're studying, think about it. And then come back to me if you find that, I misspoke or I misunderstood. Okay?
What do you call that mental process?
Which one?
Well, the one that has is linked with karma. It has
Uh, I'm not
to do
sure.
with
Excuse me?
bringing about. I think it has something to do with bringing
Is it mental continuum
the act,
or
but it's the mental process. Maybe did you say
Well, I was
the
speaking about a little bit about maybe what I was saying was about how okay, yeah, I think what you're referring to is when in each instant there's an experience, even though we
yeah,
not might be aware. Every experience on some level leaves an imprint on the consciousness.
yes,
And that consciousness is formless. So karma also is formless because it's mental stuff. Just like hatred is formless, right? Hatred is formless because it's a mental attitude. It's a mental factor.
thank you. Yeah, mental factor.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
Thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you. Okay.
Matt has his hand raised?
Oh, yes,
Can
please.
wait. It can wait. You
No,
already
no, go ahead.
started the screen.
Go ahead.
Well, it is a follow-up question on some things that you said earlier. One of those questions again. Uh, you mentioned everything is narrative.
Hmm.
Imprints can have different potencies,
Sure.
and you said to solve some of our when we get triggered and things like that with inner dialogue. A person somewhere I heard, and I thought that there was a line that really made me think for a long time, and said, "All inner dialogue is ego." How do you feel about that? And how can we trust our inner dialogue to solve problems then?
Mm. Well, yeah. I mean, I agree with that, I think. Ego, we have to remember we talked a lot about agreeing on our definitions, right? So
Yeah.
people use the word ego a lot of different ways. So I won't go into that because that's I'll just take your question as I think you mean it. Of course, we have to use the ego to break the ego. Yeah, we have no choice. But it doesn't mean all ego is bad. I mean, all ego is probably ignorant, but when we become when we sort of destroy the ego, we don't get destroyed. The mind doesn't get destroyed. So ego in this sense we're going to use as
It
sort
might
of
get freed.
we will get free. We
Yeah.
will. Because it's the ego that's imprisoning us. But
Yeah.
but not to use that word, probably Lama Yeshe used to use the word ego a lot. But I think when you get down, then you have to begin to analyze and deconstruct what we're doing in this class is we're sort of fleshing out what the ego means. Yeah. And that's why we tend to use the word mind and its different qualities. So when I think Sunshine was mentioning self-cherishing, self-cherishing is kind of really a pretty good, a pretty major aspect of the ego. Sometimes self-cherishing can almost like be a synonym for the ego, but it's not, but it's almost like it is, or it's a big factor of the ego. Okay.
Okay.
And this is all how I understand it, but you guys got to look into it for yourselves as well, right?
I think that's an interesting question, though. Like, how do you trust your inner dialogue when you are communicating with other people? And I think the way that I could think of it is
Uh-huh.
more if you're thinking in the highest best for the other person,
Uh-huh.
maybe then rather than, oh, how could that guy do that to me? Or, like what is the highest, best, most loving, compassionate that you could think of for the other person? And if you're definitely thinking that, then you can trust your inner dialogue. But if you're just upset at that person because they did that to you, I don't know. I guess I just thought that was an interesting question. I
Well,
don't really know how to
yeah.
like answer that.
Well, it changes the view, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're all about is changing view to a correct view from an incorrect view. And there's layers to that. There's layers. There's many, 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 many levels all up until enlightenment. I mean, only the Buddha has a complete correct view. But that doesn't mean that there's not lower correct views, but they're just not complete. But without any spiritual path, then there's only wrong view. Okay? Well, I shouldn't say only wrong view, but predominantly it's probably only wrong view. Okay? So this is where we've been focusing on, right? Well, do I need to review anything like this quickly? Okay, so again, the person is made up of the five. This is just a schematic. It does not inherently true. The five kind of components, which are the body, then the component of feeling, which in this case means sensation. We have, and then discrimination or discernment. Then compositional factors, which is all the things like anger and awareness and attention and sleep and uh, jealousy and attachment and ignorance. And we call those, we break those down into 51 categories, 51 elements. And then there's the six consciousnesses. Okay, so that's what we're on about. And the mind or consciousness is broken down into six. This way we experience our world. We experience our world through the body consciousness, the tongue consciousness, the nose consciousness, the ear consciousness, the eye consciousness, and the mental consciousness. I'm not going to spend, I'm rushing because we've done this a few times, right? Is that okay? Okay. And then from the mind's point of view, with the six consciousnesses and the 51 mental factors, feelings and discriminations or discernments are two of the 51. They just are broken separately because they play a more dynamic role in our experience of the world and ourselves. Consciousness, whether it's eye, ear, nose, and so on, is sort of the it's the hard drive. The sense organ is the lens or the camera, and the object out there is the one out there. Okay, you have to have all three to have an experience. As I've pointed out, if you have no sight, you don't have this experience. The eye consciousness doesn't function without the eye organ. Doesn't mean you don't experience the world because you got your hearing and your taste and all the other things. You just don't have the function of the hard drive of eye consciousness. So we've been focusing on, sorry, I'm jumping around. It's because I don't have my slides organized exactly. Sorry, I'm making you dizzy. By the way, there's I think 135 slides here, so that's why I jump around. Okay. Okay, so what we've been focused on these 51 mental factors are the 11, the six root afflictions. And then there's also 20 secondary ones. We're not going to go into those in any real depth, but you need to know this so that I'm doing my job in this class, right? Zayla, is that right? Am I doing the right thing? They have to know this. I think maybe she's off camera. So just to bear in mind, the root afflictions, we haven't finished all six, have we? Anyone know? We haven't. And these, just to give a quick snapshot, these are the secondary ones. And these are all are variations or subtleties of the six. Okay? Things like vengeance and laziness and dishonesty and avarice and cruelty and envy. Okay? But those, and I have outlined, if we have time, I'll show you which of the six root afflictions those fall under. But I think I don't want to go there right now because we haven't finished the six. Okay? These are the ones we've gone through, the root afflictions. We've gone through attachment and craving, anger, hostility, self-importance or pride. We have not gone through ignorance. I'm saving that. We did afflictive doubt, didn't we? Did we do afflictive doubt? No. And afflictive views? Afflictive views we did. Did we or didn't we? No one's saying anything. You don't remember. Too much content.
I don't, let me just check my notes, but I don't.
We didn't do afflictive doubt.
From last, no, we didn't do that. We got to like, distorted self-importance and then, like, don't drink the Kool-Aid from,
Oh, right.
yeah.
We did pride. Okay. Just stop me if I covered this, but I want to finish the six, which is that we did pride. Okay, afflictive doubt. That's one of the six. This is the definition: a wavering, indecisive state of mind tending toward an incorrect conclusion. But this only refers to important topics like the law of actions, which is karma, and the results, the Four Noble Truths, and the Triple Gem, and other things. Those are just three examples. Okay? This will get clear for you in a second. In order for a state of indecision or doubt to be counted as a root affliction. Now remember, these root afflictions we're talking about. Why? Because they disturb the mind. Okay? Does that make sense? Are you letting him in? Yeah. Okay, because we have to be very, very clear that all these afflictions are only because they disturb our happiness. Otherwise, there would be no reason to talk about them, or at least not in this context. So just having doubts is not necessarily a negative. It must be one that obstructs the development of what is wholesome, and it induces a disturbed frame of mind. Okay? And when the class is finished, I would like, Zayla, please write this down. I would really like people to please, you don't have to meditate on them. Meditating is best, but please come next week with examples from these six. And of course, anger, you don't have to do that. I mean, I know that. But come with examples of this six, but particularly the ones that maybe are less familiar to you. Okay? I'm going to read this again because it's important. I have a little more. In order for a state of indecision or doubt to be counted as a root affliction, it must be one that obstructs the development of what is wholesome and induces a disturbed frame of mind. Just having doubts is not necessarily negative. I see some people writing. Can I go to the next slide? I'll wait a minute. Okay. Afflicted indecision only occurs, again, very important here, when the object of doubt is something, the acceptance of which is crucial and valuable to one's spiritual development, such as the triple gem, karma, all these things, all these topics, okay, to one's spiritual development. So this, what you find here is this kind of indecision or doubt is not the doubt. It doesn't include indecisions about trivial, mundane topics. Should I go to San Diego? Should I not go to San Diego? Should I change my job? Not change my job? I mean, you might not think that's trivial, but anyway, it doesn't have to do with your spiritual doubt. What this has to do with is that I don't know if karma exists, so I think I'll, okay, for example, I had one client who was a veterinarian. And for a while, oh, now, I don't know if you're aware, I wasn't that aware, but uh, that person was an emergency room uh, surgeon. But she was in charge of, everything pretty much, medically speaking, it was a veterinary hospital. So everything came to her. It meant she would maybe, delegate to someone else. What she told me, I never knew, she said 50% of the cases that would come into her would be euthanized. So once she became a Buddhist, she was in a conflict, right? Now, we could say maybe not a heavy um, imprint of killing because she wasn't doing it with anger by any means, but she was doing it by attachment, probably, because she didn't want to upset the owners, or ignorance, meaning, well, since, anyway, you see what I'm saying? So if you have indecision about that, that disturbs the mind, doesn't it? You can imagine the disturbance it would cause, the indecision about. Well, I'm elaborating. I don't know if she went through that kind of indecision, but you could imagine one could, right? And so you see how the mind gets very disturbed by that? That's this affliction. Okay? Indecision prevents us from gaining any firm certainty about a particular point, and thus creates a weak, vacillating mind that is not a sound basis for a practice of Dharma. To practice, you kind of have to have some convictions. And if you're going to go into retreat, for example, or doing your meditation practice in the morning, and you're just not sure, I'm not sure this karma thing is, doesn't seem to really apply. I really don't think, I think it's just some faith-based teaching that's made to control. Yeah, I understand. I don't know if it's true, but my understanding of Christianity and the Catholic Church is that Jesus did teach about karma and did teach about reincarnation. And in the third council, or one of the councils, they took it out because they didn't like the fact that it would have less they could have less authority over the population. If people felt that they would reincarnate, then they would be more complacent about engaging in the work of the what'd you call that? Republic? I don't know what it was. So this is the kind of thing when you talk about afflictive doubt, okay? It doesn't mean, okay, we'll go on. This is, again, important. This is the contrast. Intelligent discrimination based on sound reasoning is not afflictive doubt, okay? Because we have to doubt things all the time. And we should not just accept karma, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, reincarnation on faith. Okay, so we do say that doubt tending towards belief is good doubt. This is the doubt leaning towards disbelief. So that's a very important distinction. We shall be able to reach a one-pointed state of conviction free from any hesitation or wavering. That's why we subscribe to the practice of reasoning, logic, and that sort of thing. Because we should have a doubt about karma, but it should be a doubt leaning towards belief. But I got to analyze this thing. I got to think about it. I got to study it. That's okay. That's what we're talking about, healthy doubt. Okay? And through that, you reach a one-pointed state of conviction that's free from any hesitation or wavering. For me, like, for example, karma, I feel pretty confident in that. You know, I feel like I've almost, like, maybe I'm pretty close to being there. But of course, you know, I'm not saying that in a bragging way. I'm just saying in, you know, just my personal development. But, you know, when you start looking at the finer details of karma, like when they start talking about the reason he has a mole on his chin is because, you know, and they go to some thing like, you know, 16 lifetimes ago, he had a doubt. He looked at the picture of the statue of Buddha and he noticed a blemish on Buddha's chin. I'm making this up, by the way. Buddha's chin, and he thought, oh, that doesn't look so good. You know, that Buddha's not perfect. And as a result, he was born with a mole or on his chin for 16 lifetimes. That kind of stuff, okay. You know, I have that's believed in faith. That's through faith. I have that belief. Because all the other ones, the more other areas I became convinced in, or more gross ones, led me to feel, well, wow, that was all right. Okay, I get it. Okay, but I have to accept it on faith because I have to, because I don't have the clairvoyance to see that, right? Or the meditative penetration to see that. But my faith is based on reasoning from the past. Now, okay, we're good with doubt and indecision? Any questions? We're good? Now we're going to go, what's not the last one? The last one we're going to do is ignorance, because that's the granddaddy of them all. But this fifth one, the fifth one is afflictive views. This is a little, okay, so remember, these afflicted views they use the word intelligence here, okay? That hasn't shown up in the other ones. Okay, so these are either an afflicted state of intelligence that regards the aggregates as being inherently I or mind. Now, wait, what are the aggregates? Okay, who can repeat the aggregates to me?
Body, um, oh, hang on.
It's okay.
Body, mind. No, I know body's one.
Right.
Body, mind. Why am I stuck? It's just the basic things. Hang on. Let me
It's
think.
okay. I
And
could
there's
pick.
the neighbor.
Oh, that's a neighbor. Hi, neighbor.
He's saying hello.
Hi, neighbor. Did you have your dinner yet?
They have been snacking.
What's her name?
Her name is Zyla.
What is it?
Zyla.
No, her name.
Zyla.
Her name?
Yeah, it's her name is Zyla. Yeah.
Oh, okay, Zyla.
Yeah. Yeah.
Zyla, did you have your dinner yet?
He says, "Did you have your dinner yet?" No,
Oh, oh, maybe she can't hear because you have the headphones on.
I have the headphones on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
She says no, though.
Okay. So anyone else? Anyone else want to take a stab at the five aggregates?
Perception and form.
Okay. Form
And
is right. That's like the body. And
what
then,
about
well, first of all, we'll
perception?
break it into two. We break it into two is one of the five is the body, and four are of the mind.
Okay, then mine would be perception.
So it's feelings, discriminations, or the power of discriminating, the six consciousnesses, eye, ear, nose, related to the six sense organ. And the last one is all the 51 mental factors. Those are what are called, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot. These five now you need to know. You now need to remember. Okay. And I'm not saying that in any commanding way. Just try to see when maybe after the class or at some point write them down. Or do you need me to show you them again? Would that be helpful? Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. Too bad for those couple people who dropped out of the class. They're not going to know. They're not going to get a pass. They're going to
Oh
fail.
no, they were removed. They were little Zoom bombers. They were
You
intent
mean
on
the other
disturbing.
students? The other students?
There were two more. Oh, we lost
Sunshine
Sunshine
had
for
to
a moment.
step away. She wrote us it's in the
Okay.
chat.
Okay. That's why I keep showing this slide. Let me start with that because these things build on each other, right? And I'm so glad that you didn't remember them because I want you to be honest with me. There, a living being. Living beings, you're going to hear this a lot as you continue your studies, are composed or constructed of the five aggregates. Okay, five aggregates. The aggregate of body, which is the only physical one. The aggregate of feeling, which is mental. The aggregate of discernment or discrimination, which is mental. The, the aggregate of consciousness, of which there are six. And the aggregate of compositional factors, which means all those secondary 51 mental factors. Okay. The reason I'm kind of wanting you to write this down or memorize them because as we go forward and as you continue your meditation, a lot of the meditations, well, particularly meditation on emptiness, is going to require that you know these five, not all the details, just that you know the five. And we're going into that right now because in the mistaken views, it is uh, related with the understanding of reality or emptiness of inherent existence. Okay? Yeah. And you don't have to bend over backwards to get this. You just have to know when it refers to it, you know, oh, they're talking about these things. Any questions? Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yep. And it's sort of an overall question about dividing all of this into precise categories,
Right.
where I get a little bit lost sometimes, particularly with this version of Buddhism, is how does this actually apply?
I'm trying to get there.
Okay. All right, I'll be
So,
patient.
but I answer your question because I want
Yeah,
you to ask that question all the time. Okay.
and I am, and I don't get, I'm not getting satisfactory answers for myself,
Right.
frankly.
So, yeah, it takes time, you know. Um, well, first of all, Jay, I don't know if I would. Um, so I teach a lot of different classes, right? And if I'm teaching a class, well, like I'm doing a class over at Land of Medicine Buddha called Becoming Your Own Therapist. I don't teach this stuff there. I did share the six afflicted views. Sorry, the six root afflictions. I did share that, but I didn't go into any of this detail. I mean, I did that in 5 minutes, right? You and I, all of us, have spent I don't know how many hours now doing it. That's part because this class is designed for that. So my answer to your question is this is part of the challenge is the particular class that we're doing is asking that cover this theory. Now, central to our practice, the most central meditation is a meditation on emptiness. Okay? Because emptiness means the emptiness of inherent existence. That is the chief of all practices. But then the obvious question is emptiness of what? How do I do that? Okay? And that needs a very clear explanation and study so that we are applying the practice correctly. Okay? Now, it may not be that people have different what's the word? People have different proclivities. You know what they like this more than that. I mean, we're all the same. In this part, I really like studying these texts on emptiness and that sort of thing. Maybe what I do less with, I'll tell you, to be honest with you, is I'm not big on all the rituals, butter lamps and uh, prostrations and statues and all that. That's just, I do all that stuff, but that doesn't speak to me in the same way as when I will do a meditation on emptiness or meditation on these other things. When I say speak to it, I don't discover my own inner quality, which is what I'm trying to discover or enhance through those other practices as much as I might do. And this is a phase of life, right? It changes throughout our life. But right at the moment, my focus is a little different. So for me to actually meditate on reality, I have to know what reality is. And it's very, very subtle. And a lot of people who feel they're trying to meditate on reality or the emptiness of inherent existence, all these big words, are meditating on the wrong thing because they don't understand it. They don't have the academic background. And Jay, this is one of the qualities about our in Tibetan Buddhism, not all the four schools, but this school in particular, that kind of turns people off sometimes because they want to go to the experiential, and I understand that. And but bear in mind, Jay, this is not the class on becoming your own therapist, not the class on meditation, not the class on compassion, right? This is so I hope I'm doing the class right. It's Samsara and Nirvana. And what we've been doing is what the hell is samsara? And that's why we're spending so much time on it. But maybe I'm spending too much time, you know. In Tibetan Buddhism, there's four traditions. The Tibetan words are the Gelug, Nyingma, Kargyu, Shakya. And the Nyingma were founded in the 7th century when Guru Rinpoche came to Tibet. And they still exist today. Nyingma means old school, or the foundation, old, original, maybe old. And then there was this really bad king, I think I mentioned that destroyed, almost completely destroyed the Dharma in the 10th or 11th century, 10th century, I think. maybe 11th. And to where, I mean, almost completely destroyed, much like what happened in China and during the Cultural Revolution, that sort of thing. And then, so then three schools started, three new schools were called sort of the kind of the reforming schools or kind of Renaissance schools. So the school that we're engaged in here is one of those three reform schools. And one of the things that's a hallmark of this particular school, the Gelug, is that it was speaking to reviving the authenticity of the teachings. Okay. So, and the monastic system. So it is a more academic school in some ways than the other three. Okay. They have 21-year degree, PhD degrees, Geshe degrees that the other schools don't focus on, for example, academic. Um, so I think that I'm not sure next week or by the week after, we will talk about the antidotes to these afflictions in terms of how to meditate on them. And that might be more satisfying or more speaking to what might be more resonate more with you, Jay.
Yeah, and I think the criticism I'm giving is something that I struggle with most
I
FPMT
understand.
classes.
Hey, look
And
at
and
yeah.
for me, I mean, you're making it, you're actually, I commend you because yes, you do make it more real, but it's like sometimes my head just boggles at these freaking categories and how
Hey,
I'm going to use it. And I suppose I'm more of a what can I say? One could say airy fairy, but more of a universalist in my
no,
concepts.
I don't. First of all, I'm taking it at all as criticism because I know the challenge, and that's why after years and years of doing this, I really seek a way of presenting the ideas that are realistic, right?
Yeah,
And but I've given yeah, so I don't take it as criticism. I know that what you say, 100, as my wife says, 150% is valid. You're not the only one. This is an argument or a critique that comes up all the time. So I'm
yeah.
very comfortable with you saying it. I'm not comfortable with the fact that people, struggle. I mean, that it doesn't speak to, I shouldn't say not comfortable. But in the Buddhist teachings, there is a way for everybody.
Yeah,
There is a
yeah,
way
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
And there are many of my friends, many of my friends, colleagues, they 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 gravitate, in fact, in some ways they gravitate to some of the other tradition practices because they're more experiential or they're quicker to bring people in the experiential process. Now, I will strongly urge you to, even though they're old, to read to read there's some old videos of Lama Yeshe. Have you seen any of those?
Definitely. And I feel a certain simpatico with him.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that I do too.
definitely.
Yeah, that I
Yeah,
do too. Because he was really anti this thing that you bring up.
yeah,
And yet he was one of the most learned, he was a
yeah,
Geshe.
yeah,
He,
yeah,
he
yeah,
spent
yeah,
his
yeah.
25 years. You know what? When I was with him, and I was with him a lot, but was some often I'd do his letters, his correspondence with him, and he when he fled from Tibet, he was 21, and he was engaged in his Geshe studies, which I mentioned take 21, 25 years. So he was pretty far along because he started about 6 or 7 on that. And but he wasn't able to sit for his Geshe exams and get his Geshe degree. So many years, so this must have been like 1980s, they left. So it's 21 years later, he received a letter from, I don't know, some official body. And they said, that they were granting these Geshe degrees to all these lamas who had studied but got interrupted in their studies and inviting them to come to Varanasi to receive their degree. And they still had to finish their studies, but he had finished studies in exile. And so I said, "Oh, Lama, you must be so excited. Now you can go get your Geshe degree." And he said to me, "I'm not going." I said, "Well, why not? He said, I don't need another title. I have two good names, Tupten Yeshi. I
Yeah.
don't need Geshe Tupten Yeshi.
Yeah.
So he's speaking to you, Jay.
Yeah, I know. I
Okay.
know. And I'll just give my lament. If only I had come across him instead of what I did come across
I know.
in the late 70s, early 80s. If
Yeah.
only. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, I know. I feel that way for countless people. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
started
Yeah.
a new program called the Lama Yeshe series because I'm one of the few around still that was close with him. And I'm trying to, so that's what I'm teaching at Atlanta Medicine Boots, the second part of the series, which is this becoming your own therapist. And
Okay.
with that,
All
I'm
right.
using Lam Yeshe's text for that. There's no academia. I mean, there is, but
Okay.
trying to preserve his lineage.
I'll see if I can track down the text.
Yeah.
I think it's
Becoming Your Own Therapist. It's a free book from Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive.
okay.
And you
Thank
can
you.
and you will be able to access my talks on Land and Medicine Buddha's YouTube channel. I don't know if they're
Okay.
up yet, but they will be. Okay. Some of the
Yep.
ones I did, the first series was called Are We Communicating, Dear? And that
Okay.
is up on their website, on their YouTube channel. So maybe it's helpful. Okay.
Many thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, I have to leave. Okay. So, gosh, I don't get very far. See, it's your fault, you guys, that we keep going back to the same stuff and we don't finish. Okay. So those are the five. Okay, so now you know the five aggregates, right? You don't know, but reminded of them. Okay. I'll just go through these and there's five. The other thing, Jay, and everybody, what I strive to do, and I really want to perfect, well, perfect might not be the right word, but I really want to perfect is how what Lama would do with this is he would talk about it for a few minutes and then he would go into real life occurrence with this and situation. Okay. So that's just from my lack of understanding these teachings deep enough that I can't do that as so well. But that is my goal. I would say my mission in life is to be able to communicate these teachings like Lama did, to communicate these teachings so that anyone can understand them. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, no, Lama Yeshe once told me, this is really, I think this is the essence. He told me, you need to teach these teachings, these ideas, so that your mother can understand them. Okay, that's my goal in life. I'm not doing here so well, but that is the goal. Okay, um, so
You can
these are the
just think of
five.
me as your mom.
Okay. Well,
Appreciate it.
yeah. Well, with my mom, it didn't, that discussion would last about 30 seconds and then we'd, watch the baseball game. So, you know, she was a baseball fanatic. We could watch the cricket together, okay?
No, no, we won't be watching cricket.
Aussie rules?
Yeah, it's a sure cure for insomnia.
I know. How about Aussie rules football?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Okay.
exciting. Much
Okay,
better.
I'll meet
Yeah,
you there.
okay.
I'll meet you
All
at the
right.
Oval and we'll watch it.
All
Okay.
right.
So the reading through the five, the view of the transitory composite, extreme views, views of superiority, views that regard unsatisfactory moral and spiritual disciplines as supreme, and mistaken views. What I thought, um, I'm gonna share this with you, and we'll just do this now. I mean, we won't get through all these. I mean, I'm a little bit, as you know, I'm cautious about too much content. But with this is a really, really important one. The view of the transitory composite. So now you know the transitory composite or the aggregates are the body, the feelings, the function of feeling, the function of discernment, the function of the six consciousnesses, the function of the 51 mental factors, which include, all these afflictive views. It also includes virtuous things like love and compassion, equanimity, non-harmfulness. There's 11 of those, which is the things we're trying to develop. And so with what happens is that this view of the trend, when we, our experience, our reality, our life are these five. And when we have an occurrence, like when you have a mosquito bite and you look at your arm and there's a mosquito bite, okay? Um, or when you look at these five, what Buddhism says is the thing that's keeping us bound and not free is I believe I'm my body. You know, someone bumps into you or, you know, is sort of aggressive, you know, and grabs you, you know, don't touch me. I had that happen to me not that long ago. I was trying to explain something to this young guy who was really angry, and I grabbed his arm for a second. I didn't grab it hard, but I just, you know, put my hand on his arm. Don't touch me, right? Don't touch me. That is the view of this first one, the apprehension of inherent I onto these aggregates. His arm, or in this case, his arm is not his I. It's not his identity. It's not his self, but we think it is at that moment. Now, I'm not talking intellectually. This, at this point, for our discussion, at the moment, just at this moment, is intuitively. Okay, now we go to feeling. I'm feeling really depressed today. Well, that's actually a mental factor. So feeling like it's really cold in here, a sensation through the body, but you have the mental experience of discomfort. You know, why does Karuna keep his house so cold? I'm cold. Do you see how now the I, my identity, is fused with a feeling, right? That is completely 100% wrong. But we do it every instant. Bear in mind, we know it's wrong. Now, discernment. Now, in discernment, you know, um, discernment is like, you know, you're right, you see your right hand separate from your left hand. Like, I'm not talking about the body part of that. The mental factor that knows the difference between your right hand and your left hand. Okay. And then you're discerning that your right hand is sore. Okay. And you're believing in that discernment. Okay. That discrimination. Don't worry about it because that one's kind of neutral for the most part. But when we get, and then the six consciousnesses are also sort of neutral. So when we see, so let's say I see a broken down car that no, it hasn't been moved from the side of the road down the road from me for like 2 months now, and it's starting to rust, and it's, weeds are growing on it. Why don't they remove the car? So all that dialogue that I just explained, that I just said, is after my I consciousness sees it. So the I consciousness, it can, I can say I, you know, that's my, I'm talking, oh, my, like I hear really bad music. It's better for the language. I hear really bad music playing up the road from me, right? My ear is having a sensation going to the feeling. Ear is the body. Sensation in my ear is the feeling one. It irritates me. It's loud. I should say it's loud. And the ear consciousness is registering that, but it's not really making any judgments either. It's just a camera. It's just a screen. Okay. What happens is those 51 mental factors. That's where we're starting to get into trouble. So then we say, you know, I hate heavy metal that they're playing up the road. Okay. Now we've come into the 51 mental factors. I hate it. It irritates me, right? Of course, the feeling gets labeled as irritating, as bad. And we go, I hate that music. That I is completely 150% false, but we don't see it as false. Okay. Then we go and elaborate more. Those people, should I go tell them to turn the music down? Should I go? Should I go? Should I go? I don't like that music. I'm irritated. I can't sleep. Um, I don't like those neighbors. That I is now I apprehend an inherent I onto that anger and that discomfort. Okay? The same thing, and then I'm going to stop. The same thing with mine, M-I-N-E. Why did he why did he dent my car without leaving a note? It's mine. My, I. It's mine. So that my and that I are kind of interchangeable, but we use different label. My, or, my feelings have been hurt. It's another way of saying I feel hurt. My feelings have been hurt. Okay. My wife doesn't love me anymore because she doesn't cook dinner. So my, same thing. It's projected on these 5 collections of me as I and mine when it's not. Okay. Now I'm sure I'm leaving everyone really lost. That's good. You can think about it for the next week. This is heavy. I mean, this is the most profound topic. Okay. But that is the chief wrong view that keeps us in confusion, samsara. Okay. And this what I was just explaining is related to the 6th root affliction as well, which is ignorance. And ignorance is really the one to talk about the most. I hope you come back. Zayla, maybe it's just you and me next week. And she's going to have her screen turned off, her camera turned off.
Yeah.
Jay, come back, okay?
Oh, yeah. Look,
Okay.
listen,
No.
I've got one more thing to say,
Yes, please.
which is all about karma is being done by Gus Cutts. There have been 2 classes so far. There's 3
Oh,
more to go at Shanti Deva.
that's right.
And that's on your time, Mountain Time would be Wednesdays at 5 p.m.
Yeah, I'm actually on Pacific time, so 4 o'clock.
Oh,
But
yours is, yeah. But well, I'm just giving to the general folks
oh,
here. I'll
okay.
put a
Oh, I
link
see.
in if anybody's
Oh, right.
interested about finding out about karma.
Yeah.
And yes, I love him dearly, and he is even more intellectually challenging than most.
I know the type, believe me.
And he's gorgeous, but
You
yeah,
and you should be so thankful that I'm trying my best not to be that.
I am. Oh, I
Because
have,
that's
you have no
that's who
idea.
I wanted. That was the path I wanted to go down, and Lama told me no.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay.
You know what he told me?
What did he tell you?
Work. I wanted to be a monk. I don't want you to be a monk. I speak Nepalese and I was learning pretty good Tibetan. He told me to stop learning Tibetan. I don't want you to be a translator. Don't want to be a
Wow.
monk. Don't want to be a translator. I want to go study that. No, you don't need to study. You've studied so much, which I had. Okay, but I want to go do a retreat. No, no retreats. You work. I have done
Wow.
retreats. I have said, but you see, it's only a really, really enlightened person that's concerned about your enlightenment that knows. We think we know. I should be a
Yep.
monk. I should become an academic. I should become a scholar. I should become a translator. Look at
Yep.
me now, confusing everybody. Okay, good night. Look
Thank
forward to
you.
seeing you next week. I will be in San Diego, so I'll talk to you from a hotel room. But I could hide that, but I'm honest. Okay, thank you. Okay, and let's
Many.
just I did ask to please just become familiar with these 6 afflictions. Okay, don't worry about ignorance. Become familiar with them. Do you know what the definition of meditation is? This will blow your mind. So Jay, I know I'm
Contemplation.
talking to you because you talk to me, but the definition, I'm serious, in Sanskrit and in Tibetan, the definition, not the literal translation of meditation means to become familiar.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what we're doing. I want you to become, so I'm explaining all this content so that you can become familiar with it in your own minds and your own world. Okay. So please hold me to that as well. Okay. Okay. Good night.